So just to quickly get started, I know we are running on a tight schedule, so I'll just dive right in. I think Nischay talked about a lot of trends that we unearthed as part of the report, and what the CXOs told us, what we learned from platforms. It's a full dossier in terms of where the industry is headed. But I really want to kick off the panel with a slightly macro question, and going back to the first slide that Nischay had, which talked about enterprise spend of about $1 trillion on digital transformation, and the fact that CXOs are really prioritizing intelligent automation as one of the biggest bets with respect to digital automation. So the question really, and maybe we'll start with Eric Yu, and then we'll get one demand side view from perhaps Max, right? I've heard people say that automation is not really a tech segment, but it's a secular trend across enterprises, right? I mean, like we discussed, it's a boardroom conversation, everyone's looking at it. Are we at a point where automation is really starting to become synonymous with digital transformation? How close to that we are? How far are we from automation being the center of driving enterprise digital transformation, Eric?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, when I reflect on conversations and what I've seen out in the field, and obviously we have to do most of it virtual now, but when we talk to folks, big shift over the last couple of years. I would say we are getting to that point where automation is often synonymous with digital transformation. And I would say what I personally see is that many organizations might have started around like one or two capabilities, and they might have had a center of excellence, and it was on, process mapping, or it was a center of excellence for, RPA. I think what organizations are thinking though more now is more holistically about process. They're thinking about the process end to end. They're thinking about how do they transform that process, and then automation is a critical component of it, and multiple different capabilities, like what you showed in the process landscape or the landscape of the different capability sectors. We're seeing organizations, particularly in the larger enterprise side, be much more holistic, much more thoughtful. And so I would say today for leading enterprises, and I think you have that one view of the Fortune 250, those folks over on the right, those are the types of people where it is absolutely synonymous. Now, on the flip side, when we get into some of the more smaller to mid-market organizations, I'd say a lot of those are still much earlier, and they have a lot more work to go. And so like a lot of times you see the more sophisticated enterprises put more resources, more investment, and that's certainly what we see in the market. But definitely a big shift to where I think there is a lot of truth in the statement you made.
Great. So what you're saying is some sector of the market is already thinking of automation as DT, digital transformation, and there's growing maturity of the rest of the market to get as much closer to that phenomenon as possible. Max, you have led the automation initiatives for a very large organization. You have looked at it up close. How much do you agree or disagree with automation being synonymous to digital transformation?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's a privilege to be a part of this fantastic panel. I've read your reports every single year, so it's great to be on this panel. And just for additional context, I've been working in the advertising industry for most of my career within digitally native agencies. And so I've always been on the customer and demand side for intelligent automation solutions from that perspective. So from my point of view, I see that digital transformation initiatives have already long ago lost their excitement, especially within the digitally native companies. I mean, when we hire people and they hear about digital transformation initiatives, they want to run away from it. If you've been digitally transforming for the past 20 years, something is wrong there. So, and personally, I've been pretty much always viewed digital automation as synonymous with, and sort of as the next evolutionary phase of operational excellence more than anything else. And so to me, digital automation is a mindset for the business. And it's a mindset that needs to be on the mind of every single employee. And it needs to be a cultural shift that seeks to eliminate manual work using artificial intelligence. And so it becomes an essential part of that operational excellence 3.0 success formula, if you know what I'm talking about, where process plus people plus technology and today plus big data and plus AI together essentially enable the enterprise to reach the new heights of operational excellence. So that's my perspective on it.
I love it. I think the fact that digital native companies run away from quote unquote digital transformation, I think is an interesting viewpoint. And I couldn't agree more with your point on a large part of automation historically being seen as operational efficiency scenario. Our survey actually pointed to that along with cost savings as one of the big drivers. But what was even more interesting in my view, and maybe I'll bring Chris from Kofax for this question, because Chris and I have chatted about this in the past as well. Chris, you would have noticed that like shareholder experience, right? Customer, partner, employee experience, along with business resilience were the other two very close, to OX and cost saving outcomes that enterprises are starting to think of from an automation perspective. I know you have a point of view there. Can you decouple this for our audience? What does this total experience, as some of our friends in the industry are calling it, or the shareholder experience that we are, calling it, what does it really mean, and how is automation really driving the experience transformation beyond operations at the moment?
Yeah. So one, I think Eric made a salient point earlier around sort of the personas within organizations that are investing in to drive certain outcomes. So investing in automation AI to drive certain outcomes. And previously, I think automation tools were primarily a back office investment that our IT liaison shops within lines of business were making. But what we're seeing is this convergence, not just of technologies, but the convergence of the organizations. Example, I'm sure we all have, large, financial institution customers that have basically put in place VP of commercial banking or commercial services. And what they've essentially done is they've started to converge internal departments. Example would be internal department for Kofax would be document imaging, and then their RPA Center of Excellence converging into what now they're calling their Intelligent Automation Center of Excellence. And in doing that, I think what we're seeing is the back office metrics primarily around operational efficiency, and then the front office metrics primarily around experience. The customers are what we're providing, is it sticky to drive revenue uplift? I think you're seeing those metrics start to come together now because of the convergence of the personas. And that's really important. I think that's also driving the convergence of low code, no code with professional development platforms. I know, and again, certain that most on this panel, we're all making investments in putting a low code wrapper around our enterprise grade software. And it's to support this federated model that Nischay sort of covered in unveiling the report. And so that's how we're starting to see it, is that yes, 5 years ago, there was a clear sort of stratification between, resilience and the experience. But that is all starting to come together because I think organizations, one, again, converging the organizational design. So you've got one person that's sort of responsible for outcomes on both sides. But you also have this dynamic of leveling of the playing field where small startups are now able to be digitally native, so digital first, cloud first. And without much of a physical footprint, they're now having the impact and the reach that these larger companies are having. Therefore, they can move faster. And I think that, again, is accelerating this convergence and the ability for these low-code platforms now to come in and cater and support this federated model, which allows the company to now begin to absorb the shocks. So the resilience is, can we absorb the shocks, the macro shocks to the system? Think back the last 3 sort of recessions, all the way from the dot-com bust through the financial and housing crisis to the most recent COVID health-induced financial downturn. And so those are major shocks. And so I think the resiliency is intended to allow organizations to navigate those downturns. And then the experience, everything from a subscription model where customers are now more of a threat than competitors, because customers in a subscription model, very easy for them to turn you off and turn on a competitor. So the competitive landscape now is more with the customers and fighting to win that work on a daily basis. With traditional sort of competitors within the vendor landscape, to Eric's point, it's more about an ecosystem. So us working together to make and delight our customers. And so that's how I sort of see the stratification. So how these are coming together to be meaningful and basically shape the board and CEO and management team conversations.
Yeah, great. I love the point on converged tech and over and above that, the convergence of organizations. It's really moving from a tech imperative to a business imperative, right? And Jay, I want to bring you in. You represent a very large enterprise, you've been leading automation initiative. How real is the focus on customer experience, and is there a clear shift you're observing in moving away, not away, but augmenting OX focus, operational efficiency focus with customer experience focus as part of the automation initiatives?
Great. Praveen and Nischay, thanks for having me, and then really happy to be here with, amongst all the panels over here. It's listening to a lot of the folks on this panel, right? So we're talking about customer experience, we're talking about automation, but if we go back to multiple decades, right, the advent of technology was to how do we make our life easy, right? How do we do it faster? How do we do it quicker? How do we do it in a way that has quality associated to it, value associated to it, right? So as we look at our automation and sort of my point of view on automation and all things digital, how do we make the experience better? How do we make sure for us, right, for our patients, we're giving quality medicine, it's 100% compliant? How do we make sure that all the staff, right, all the different processes that need to come together to get that product out is fully synonymous and automated in a way? So, and it is real, right? It is a real problem because if you think about the pandemic, to your question, overnight, a lot of the folks went remote. Overnight, things that we were used to doing, sitting next to each other. I'm actually in the office today, right? Sitting next to each other, now we have to do it in a digital way. How do we come up with those solutions? So for us, we started our automation journey back into early 2019, and really, how do we solve a business problem? So to me, a lot of times I always come to the table, always talk to my business, say, hey, what is a problem you're trying to solve? Let's understand that first. How do we make sure we take that problem? It's not a technology problem, it's a business problem. So let's understand the business problem and take that business problem and say, okay, how can I do a quick win? If we try to go to the big red elephant or the big white elephant in the room, guess what? We're not going to be able to do that. Let's take it piece at a time. Let's take a look at, say, okay, here's a business process. Great. Why is this a problem? What's causing you, sleepless nights on this process? So we take that process and kind of win step at a time, step at a time, step at a time. So for us, we were able to do that in the automation journey. And when during the pandemic, there were other business problems. So we were able to help our colleagues take those problems, and now culturally, they're accustomed to that. Culturally, it's like, yep, this works, will help us now in our key business problems. So it goes back to change management, goes back to, I think, what Nischay was talking about, right? It's those processes and getting those people on board. And after that, it's, quick wins and quick success and moving the needle. So,
yeah.
So I'm actually in the office, so the light went off over here. I'm just going to walk around a little bit.
No problem. I think it's great input. I think starting with the business problem, and then I'm extrapolating what both of you said, right? Having a little bit better understanding of the processes and workflow, and then using, in a very systematic way, using automation technologies to solve that business problem because you have deep understanding of the process underlying it, could really deliver the outcomes for you. Param, what does it mean for a product company, right? You've been a pioneer in this industry, you've scaled so much. How's the product story changing from, hey, this can save cost and resources to it can deliver superior experiences? What's happening in the product side of the equation?
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. As we've gone through the pandemic, and we've seen what I like to say, irregular transformation taking place as we went down to the lockdown and then came out of the lockdown. What we've realized in terms of product experiences and what problems we're trying to solve is exactly, I think, what Jai was saying, which is it is a business problem that we have to go solve, not a technology problem that we have to solve. So, the kinds of things that we have seen our customers deal with through this pandemic is, we've seen the demand scale up in certain parts of their business in a very irregular and sort of an exponential fashion, right? There's all of a sudden a lot more orders to fulfill for certain products, and they all need to get fulfilled like right away. We saw the healthcare. We talked about the healthcare use case from Cleveland Clinic, where care management is getting transformed because all of a sudden the amount of care that needs to be administered is so much that there isn't enough capacity. So you've got to find those efficiencies to be able to do. We've seen a lot of applications of applying technology in a way, automation technology in a way that is actually helping solve the business problems that companies and our customers are trying to solve. We've also seen use cases in things like contact centers. It's really emerged out because all of a sudden, as people aren't going to the tellers at a bank, or they aren't visiting the retail locations, they're calling for help. They're calling for anything that they need. So contact centers have to not only support sort of virtual at-home contact center support, but they also have to take a lot more volumes, and automations really help drive the ability to handle and deliver better experience across channels, as you say as well, right? And I'd say the last thing that we've kind of seen, in terms of application of products and technology to solve business problems is around sort of labor and the displacement that's taken in labor, through in recent times, and people have compared sort of the displacement of labor that's happened now to the displacement that happened during World War II. Like, we've moved more people into different jobs that fast that we haven't done in almost 100 years. And that, automation has been very helpful there as well, from processes like how do you manage employee onboarding processes quickly and do that. One of the things that we've learned in sort of applying our technology is making sure that automation can be deployed quickly. Right? It isn't about a 12-month transformation initiative or an 18-month initiative. It is about what you can do in days and deliver value to businesses in weeks and get them going. So it's been fascinating to see this.
That translates into more solution accelerators, more marketplace approaches, pre-built scenarios, because there's so much learning coming from what customers are using automation for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not as much as finished, because every company, what we also notice is that every company is there is no precedence for what we have seen. So there isn't a pre-finished sort of like, here's how we would do manufacturing for these kinds of circumstances. Every company is trying to adopt sort of really, really fast to this. So, they're looking for, when they look at products and capabilities from providers of automation technology, they're looking for resiliency and the ability to adopt that technology at scale very, very quickly. So the flexibility to extend the stack really, really easily, and then ability to deploy that in production and measure the return on that, what has been deployed within like near real time, is what we've seen businesses sort of strive for, which is we want to deploy this, yesterday, and we want to start measuring the impact that's having in our business as soon as it gets deployed, and that's been key.
Sure. So I want to bring Ulf at this point. Ulf from ABBYY. I think Param talked about this customization of the stack, speed, the ability to measure ROI, right? But preceding all of this is this big element of discovering the right thing to automate, right? Discovering the right process to automate. And our survey has constantly pointed to the insight that a lot of enterprises are still using very legacy, manual, crowdsource-based approaches to really, identify processes, all experiential, tribal knowledge, which is what is at play in terms of discovering the right process. And then once they know the process, all of what Param said could follow. But, you have made acquisitions in this space. You've seen this space very closely for the last 3 years. What are enterprises losing out when they think of pure manual, crowdsourced, experiential process discovery? What are they losing with this kind of an approach, if at all?
Thank you. And again, congratulations on the launch today, and thanks for having me. Now, I think it's a very good question, because what we've seen is a massive change over the past few years. Now, obviously, the process mining industry has been around for a long, long time, and was originally designed to solve a different problem. But we've also seen over the last maybe even 2 years only, the massive change in terms of investments, in terms of funding, in terms of acquisitions, in terms of analyst coverage. And we have a couple of unicorns, at least one of them, in that group as well. So something has happened, right? And it's really the enterprises or indeed the automation vendors' attitude towards understanding, a deep understanding of what's going on in the various business processes. And we talked to many of my colleagues around the table here today have already talked about, we're solving a business problem. That's all we're doing. And the business problem at hand is a more or less complex process that needs to be automated. But in order to automate it, you need to understand it, first of all, right? And the second thing is, of course, that how do you make this more sticky? So I think from a trend point of view, what I think is really important to bear in mind is that, from the sort of the broader end-to-end process intelligence or process mining or discovery, you narrow it down onto to task mining, which I think is going to be much more to the point in the months and years to come. But beyond that, also, there's still a gap between the output of your task mining tool and the start of the automation process. So I think one trend that we're going to see is really the bridging of that gap to have a much more prescriptive analytical output that tells you, well, here's a process, here's how it works, here's how we can automate it, and not only what that you should automate it, but how you can automate it. And then finally, I think to make it more sticky, you need to add operational monitoring. Because once you've done it, and Param was already mentioning that a few minutes ago, is that you need to see the efficiencies that you gained. And not only that, you need to see when things are not going well. So some sort of alerts or some sort of real life or real time operational monitoring needs to be added to that as well.
That's a great point. I love your perspective on the role of the process mining, process discovery, not culminating into what, but also to suggesting the how of the automation. Eric, similar to ABBYY, Nintex has made acquisitions and you've been pivoting or rather expanding capabilities on process discovery, process intelligence, and those kind of areas. What is your take? Are companies using a more tool-based scientific approach, or you see some patterns where companies are losing out because of the manual intervention that they do in this part of the value chain?
Well, I think first off, just holistically, I'd agree with Ulf. I think they are absolutely trying to understand better. I think the one thing that they're doing less of, which I saw earlier on, a lot of times people would just run straight to automation, and then they would find later that they didn't get the results they were looking for, and what all they had done was automated a poorly designed process. So I think, as Max mentioned earlier, this notion of operational excellence, really thinking of the process. Now, when you start to do that, it does lead you down this path of how do we discover more of what's happening in the business. And so whether it's traditional process mining, or I would agree with Ulf also, I think task mining actually probably going to get at more of the opportunity that exists in enterprises, kind of that last mile of work. Organizations are now putting some time in there, but I still think there's a bit of a challenge. I don't see very many that are having tremendous success with it. We are blessed to do business with a lot of the world's largest companies. They're doing some of it, but have they been holistically able to go across the entire enterprise, end-to-end, wall-to-wall, figure out every single process, monitor it to the nth degree, and automate all of them? The answer is no. I think the technologies need to get a little bit easier to use. They need to be a little bit more business friendly. I think when you look at something like a process mining technology in particular, very hard for someone who actually owns a component of the business to understand outputs from them. I think the task mining is getting better. And then I think the flow through into process mapping technologies, where you can actually look at, understand, and an average person can work with what it is, will be important. So I would totally agree with the last couple of years, a lot more intensity. And I think this next, let's call it 3 years, I think these things will become more mainstream, more practical, more useful. And I think you'll see a lot more benefit from them.
Awesome.
And I think, if I may just jump in quickly and say, what I think will make us take this jump, or make the process intelligence, to use a broader word, take this step is really to make itself more sticky, more sort of runtime, and be valuable across the whole cycle, and not just as an analytical tool that you start with and it has a natural end and then you sort of throw it away. So that's, I think, has become the way we see it. And I think the market sees and the enterprise look at it that way, because why would they spend a lot of money on a tool that they're using once or twice and then not that much anymore? So we need to make it more sticky. That's one way to increase the value.
It's almost like a flywheel, right? You do discovery, you automate, you come back and do more discovery, and you automate more, and then go from there.
And the monitoring, yes.
And monitoring, absolutely. So Jay, bringing you and Max back on here, I think one of the big problems, and if I combine what Ulf said and what Param said, right, there are multiple journey points in the automation workflows, right? And, enterprises today at least are adopting a multi-platform strategy, right? So they have a different tool for discovery, different tool for process reengineering, different tool for automation, workflows, RPAs, what have you, right? How a large enterprise makes the right decisions around the platforms, right? What is the approach, and Nischay did talk about a broad framework, but I want to get some pragmatic views from you. What's the right way of thinking multi-platform strategy, right? Is that even viable? Is that constraining? Is that the right thing to do? What has been your experience so far in that category?
It's a good question. We're actually going through that process right now as we speak, right? So when we started the automation journey, we had partnered, with some system integrators in kind of looking at what that landscape is, right? We had looked at some of these research studies, say, okay, who are the players in the industry and who do we really partner with to start out this process? We looked at obviously the usual suspects that you had mentioned in the report over here. But for us, it was truly initially about who's going to be more flexible and nimble with us, because I am not able to change the business process, but what I am able to do is take that business process and use technology to see how I can fit to that business process, even though, right, it goes back to change management. That process may not be mature. That process may not be in a position where I know I can get the most value out of it. But to provide that value to my business, I need to work with partners, in this case, providers or tools that are nimble, that are flexible. So once we do that, right, we're able to kind of adopt that journey, and we've been able to do that. Right? We went from one bot 2 years ago north of 55 bots, where we're that's the journey we are. Now, with that, on top of that, as we're looking at other opportunity, whether if it's business process automation, process mining, task mining, and looking at even digital engagements, right? So that engagement that we have with our customers, and for us, it could be a technology customer, or it could be an end user, some other place. Is the technology have the right technology, or do we need to look for, again, another provider, another technology, which is nimble and kind of work together? So I don't think it's a one size fits all sort of a solution. The idea is you need to work with a partner who's going to be nimble with you, because if the partner is not willing to adapt with your business processes, then again, they may not be the right partner. It could be that their processes are at a mature state where, when you look at automation, right, we're at the advent of getting, I think one of your slides, Nischay had mentioned, right, you've got the triangle in the middle, which is the human element. Well, guess what? You need to get that human element right. You need to get that cultural element right. Everything else works out. Because once you get that human element right and get people comfortable, and in order to do that, you need to work with the right partner to get comfortable. So,
got it. So it goes back to the point of platforms are investing in R&D for the future. They are, customizable, verticalized. They offer the flexibility for companies to experiment and be prepared for the future, right? Max, in your sorry. Jay,
sorry, Praveen. I was going to say, the other thing I would say is a partner who wants to listen to you.
Yeah.
A partner who is willing to take feedback to say, hey, I understand that this may not work, but we'll put this in our roadmap. Because I think we've been able to work with partners who have been able to do that for us as well. Because every business is different, every process is different, and there's no one size fits all solution, right? So we're at a point where have it your way, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you know who coined that term. It is truly have it your way in this day and age, and especially with a consumer, which is used to the, I'll call it the a very ease of use device, right? I want to do it now and what it now. So kind of leave you with that.
Sounds good. Max, your opinion, best of breed capabilities or a unified platform?
Yeah, I'd say, looking back at where we were when we began this whole journey in 2017, and there wasn't really a clear blueprint or sort of a prescribed way to approaching intelligent automation at scale. And Dentsu, with 65,000 people globally, with 1,000 different P&Ls, this really required a very coordinated and thought out approach to where to begin and how to scale this. And our philosophy, I guess, from day one was that it's going to take the right technology stack, a diversified automation technology stack, in order for us to meet the challenges of all sorts of flavors and different kind of opportunities that we were identifying in the business. And so one thing that worked really well for our automation COE was that from day one was that continuous experimentation with emerging startups. I mean, from day one, we worked with all top 5 RPA platforms. We didn't know what they can do. We didn't know how they're going to grow 4 or 5 years ago. We didn't know what they're going to turn into. We didn't know where they fit in our business. But outside of our PA, there's everything else we wanted to experiment with: NLP, ML, AI, chatbots, just all sorts of narrow solutions. And so again, that continuous experimentation with all of the emerging startups was something that was ingrained in the culture of the automation COE. So we made it a point to talk to new and emerging technology startups at least 2-3 times a week, select one or two, experiment with them, tinker with them, see how they fit in. Even if they don't, we wanted to understand what they can do, because an opportunity may come up later in the large business. We didn't know what's going to be in our pipeline. We didn't know what we're going to discover through our process mining efforts. And so we just wanted to see what's out there and create our own unique automation technology stack that's right for Dentsu's business. And it was really the solution architect's job to learn these technologies and decide when to apply them to a business challenge when that arises. So for us, it was kind of a hybrid approach. On one hand, we were exploring possibilities, what these technologies can do. On the other hand, we were mining for these opportunities and trying to find the middle ground. Makes sense.
Jonathan, you've been very patient. I'll bring you in now. And we are already running out of time, right? So this topic is such that, the conversations can be endless. But very quickly, Jonathan, your viewpoint from GM financial standpoint, right? The possibilities around low code and no code, and if you can briefly demarcate, right, what makes more sense? Is it the low code way of doing things as we look at the future, or no code stands any chance over the next several years?
Well, each year there seems to be more and more low code, no code offerings in the market, which is great. There's more competition than there's ever been before, and there's more ability to find ecosystems to work with to achieve these business problems. The growth in low code, no code creates these opportunities for the IT workers and non-IT workers alike, developers, or professional or non-professional, to really deliver solutions. And that value for low code, no code is really unlocked by delivering a volume of solutions. We're immature in our, and as in general, in the market, in our ability to identify what are the best processes to automate, whose tasks need to go first, and where we're going to get the most ROI. And so that value is unlocked by volume. And in the end result from it all is we achieve more time freed up for professional developers to focus on tasks of greater complexity. And on the business side, the non-IT business side, they're able to get through tasks that they really need completed quickly and don't have to wait in line, a bottleneck, if you will, for development sources to be freed up. And so, increased competition in the market with low code, no code is great. It's driving innovation, and the end result is customers that have great solutions and more opportunities to offer solutions to all of our customers, whether they're internal or external.
Awesome. I heard this first from Chris, right, when we were talking about low code, no code. So his point is it's not software eating the world, but the developer capacity that enterprises will build that will eat the world. And what better than low code, no code to build that capacity, right? Yeah. So with that, I want to bring Chris, Param, and Ulf one more time. And I have a 3-part question, right, that I wanted to kind of conclude the panel with. The question is this, right? When we talk to these enterprise CXOs and when we try and understand their automation journey, there are 3 types of problems that we invariably see, right? And I want your reaction on each of those 3 problems. Maybe Chris, I'll start with you, right? The first problem that they oftentimes cite is the start point of the journey, right, is very complex, very cumbersome. It's not easy to define, right? A lot of companies want to do it, but they don't know what's the right way to start their automation journey. If you are in a meeting with a CXO like that, what would your quick advice to that CXO be?
Yeah, my advice would be read a book. Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. It focuses on marketing of basically technology and software. But what it does a really good job of doing is it systematically breaks down how you should target early efforts in order to engage effectively, win early, and set momentum. Basically crossing the chasm, and that chasm being the visionaries who are going to support your early efforts to the pragmatists that will only join your effort when others have proven it viable. And so it's a great book. It's at the right level, and it will really sort of help set the stage for leadership as they then begin to sort of, set strategy and execute the program.
Got it. So the second problem that we often hear, and maybe Ulf, you can respond to this, right, is the fact that once they make up their mind, right, and they know that they have to do automation, the big problem that they deal with is, how to drive change in the organization, right? It's a big initiative. It might mean job losses in one area, job creation in another area. There's a lot of anxiety around it. What are the best practices to drive change in that sense in an organization which is decided, but dealing with the human side of automation is always a challenge. So what's been your recommendation to that?
No, I think you're absolutely right, Praveen, that it's dealing with the human side is always difficult. But I think that one thing that we as leaders have all learned in the last 15 months is the value of communication, unless we knew it before. Communicate. And when I say communicate, don't only say what's good, but also confront what's difficult and what may even be bad. I think being honest, but also to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and how and if that will impact certain people or certain organizations, and address it the way it is, not better, not worse. Most of these changes that you go through, and frankly, I have been through so many changes in ABBYY's organization over the past 4 years that I can't even count them. But you set a goal and you drive the company and the organization towards those goals. And you know what? People understand that. I've even had situations where people say, understand that we're making these changes and what I'm doing right now may not be the right thing for the company, but they are treated with that respect. And I think the same goes for all automation initiatives that you're going through in the enterprise organizations.
Got it. Thank you. And Param, the last challenge that we hear is about, hey, I am ready to invest. I know how to drive change, but I don't know how to manage governance, right? Working with bots, AI, humans, APIs, all together, governance is a big issue, right? So quick comments on the other two challenges if you have, and more specifically on how do you advise enterprises to address the governance issue with automation?
Yeah, I first of all, I'd say I agree with a lot of the comments that Ulf and Chris made around how to start the journey, and it's really all about for us, starting is really all about starting small, iterating quickly, and measuring rapidly what you're doing. And I think that's instead of planning a big journey, sort of start there and then start to grow, as Max and Jay mentioned about their journeys and how they started with a robot and got to like 50 within a year. On change management, absolutely. I mean, you've got to make sure you engage everyone and make sure that automation is built for every aspect, every corner, every employee within the organization, from a developer to an end user to a business owner that can measure the return on that, and make sure you have a good sort of operating framework to cross the chasm. And make sure the communication of that is well managed. On governance, as what we've seen as we talk about sort of automation for everyone, governance is really important and something that a lot of organizations struggle with. A lot of times it means to an IT organization deploying automation platform to say we got to control what people are doing. And I think the mindset is changing now. It's going from being controlled to facilitating what others are doing and making sure that people aren't getting in trouble because now they have a very flexible way of doing things. And to us, governance is all about giving the ability for a COE, for a robotic operating leaders to be able to manage what can be done by different stakeholders in the automation, and being able to deploy that easily. If you're a citizen developer, you can do these things. If you're an RPA developer, you can do all these things. And then being able to have the logs to audit the impact of automation, like how many robots did we run yesterday and which ones did what, and being able to set an alerting mechanism so you can understand and get real-time alerts and if you see anomalies on the behavior of what robots are doing. But yes, it's a key topic that I think we heard less and less about governance 2 or 3 years ago. And now every conversation that we're having with our customers, especially as we're talking about citizen development and getting low-code, no-code, development platforms, is centered around, well, how do we actually govern this thing? And what can you do to help us support this? Very important topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think I'll probably bring Eric one more time for a final comment. What are you most excited about the automation industry for the next 2 to 3 years?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one there, Praveen. There's so much to be excited about and feel blessed. I would say, you know, for me personally, it's the fact that it's gone so mainstream and there's so much investment behind it. The reality of it is that a lot of the marketing and you know, we all do it. You know, we like to hype and position our things, but I think the truth of the matter is now, particularly the AI and the NLP and the machine learning, a lot of those things are actually providing real impact. I think the understanding of how to apply these technologies to solve real problems has dramatically improved. And what personally I love is the difference it makes in these organizations. And so I think the thing I am most excited about is that I think the impact that all of us on this call and others in the industry will have, the level of ROI that our customers will be and are receiving and will receive over the next few years is going to be massive. And I think that personally is the part I'm most excited about, is that I know that the difference we are all going to make, I think, is going to be exponentially higher, and you know, we'll certainly be rewarded for that. So that's what has me most excited.
Awesome. Amen to that. And I hope the industry continues to grow as per the projections that Zinnov has made, even higher than the projections that we have made. And I really appreciate all your time. And I had so many questions that are left, but I know, you know, these conversations can go anywhere. But I really appreciate your time, your insights, your candid feedback. And I would love to get your feedback on the report as well. But thank you so much for joining us today. And back to you, Vansh.